That was the second day of testimony, actually, from the wrestlers. The third day, which was Wednesday, Dr. Zahorian was called in his own defense, and it was a tearful testimony. If we could bring Dave Meltzer back on with us right now, perhaps the most damaging when it comes to Hulk Hogan. This is all documented. This was stated under oath, and even though, Dave, I don't think the promotion wants to still comment on any of this, but Zaharian admitted that he was a very close friend of Hulk Hogan since 1984, and Hogan used to get steroids from him. And he said Hogan had a very serious steroid abuse problem. Up until he got Hulk Hogan off steroids, he said it was approximately 2 years ago. Now, that was incredible testimony from the doctor, tearful testimony. He broke down on a witness stand and cried. But to Hulk Hogan's reputation, Dave, doesn't really help, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't help, and it brings up a lot of contradictions, and I don't know what's going to happen. I know that the people in wrestling, within the World Wrestling Federation, I mean it's a thing that they don't really want to comment on because it will just give the statement more publicity, and what's going to happen regarding that. I would say is probably nothing.
Mm-hmm. Also being brought up during that testimony from Zaharian, they wanted to know who else was buying steroids from him. And he stated once again under oath during his testimony that he had sent steroids to various members of the wrestling community. And he pointed out one. He pointed Vince McMahon out. And he said he had sent steroids over to McMahon, or packages to McMahon, which is pretty damaging in itself. So, we don't know what the situation was. We'd love to get a rebuttal, but I guess the WWF right now has to read the transcripts of this trial. I believe that's what they told you, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah. They don't want to comment on anything until they read the transcripts of the trial. Their official statement is that nothing that they're not going to acknowledge that anything about the trial had anything to do with the World Wrestling Federation. So they really didn't make any comment on any aspect of the trial other than they were glad it was over.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the whole wrestling world is glad it's over, but it's just something that's not going to go away. After Zaharian testified, his attorney, Bill Kostopoulos, once again met with the press, and he had this to say about his client's testimony that day.
I don't think this trial is the right one.
Are you still going after the constitutionality of the steroid law?
Very much so, Jan. And if anything, the testimony from the wrestlers underscored my very strong belief that I'm right. My position is, and always has been, that a doctor should have a right to dispense medications to an athlete if that doctor determines it poses no health risk. And an athlete should have a right to take them. An athlete should have a right to get big. He should have a right to get strong. He should have a right to performance enhancement. We should have a right to see the wrestlers that we see today. And I think this steroid law is just going to drive them to the black market, and I think it's the worst thing we can do.
That was Mostopoulos from the other time. Now we're going to get to him from the day the doctor testified. Just keep the tape rolling.
He loved those wrestlers, and the portrayal of him is very genuine. And from day one, with our involvement in the case, our position is he was the doctor of these wrestlers. He cared about these wrestlers. He has never denied dispensing steroids to these wrestlers for purposes of personal gain, performance enhancement. He's not denying it today. He doesn't deny having done it after November the 18th, 1988, at a time when he didn't even know the law changed. And it's that law that we're very troubled with, because the defense position is that Dr. Zahorian, as a doctor, should be allowed to dispense steroids to wrestlers for performance enhancement.
You had asked for a mistrial during the case. What was that all about?
What that was all about was I thought the government was getting awfully cute with some unfair cross-examination questions of character witnesses. You're in the pit. Those things will happen. I think the prosecutor was wrong. And that's just the cost of doing business when you're in.
He's contended that he's helped some wrestlers get off steroids, including Hulk Hogan.
He testified that he helped some steroids get off. He helped some wrestlers get off steroids, including Hulk Hogan. And I don't think that's a shocking revelation. He's a good doctor, and he's helped a lot of wrestlers, and Hulk Hogan was one of them. And that comes as no surprise to me.
Okay, basically, Kostopoulos spoke to the press. He was a pretty flamboyant, just to give you an idea of what this guy was all about. In the court every day with the three-piece suits and the hand-painted ties and the cowboy boots. So if there was a defense attorney for a trial involving professional wrestlers, Kostopoulos was certainly the guy to defend Dr. Zahorian. But Zahorian's big defense was that he claimed to be the wrestlers' physician, their personal physician, which most of the wrestlers on the stand denied, of course, that he was, in fact, because they were patients of his, able to distribute steroids to him. His other defense was that he did not know that the federal law changed as far as distribution of steroids. He just didn't know the law had changed. So he was pleading pretty much ignorance that this law had changed involving the distribution of steroids for other than medical purposes. And it was just a pretty cut-and-dry case. Perhaps the most damaging testimony was by superstar Billy Graham, who took the stand as a rebuttal witness for the prosecution on day number 4 of the trial, which was Thursday. And that, of course, that was the last day of the trial. But Billy Graham, not doing so well. He's going in for another hip operation in September. He's going to have another operation on his ankles. He hobbled into that courtroom. He was using the use of a cane. And just to hear him and to see him walk was the most upsetting for me over the last week, just to see how this great man, this great ex-champion, is now because of use of steroids. Now, Billy wanted to speak to the press after he finished testifying, and we have that segment and that banter with the press right now. We'll play for you. This took place day 4 of the trial.
Answer that. In about a matter of days, as soon as this verdict is in this trial, we will be holding a press conference in Philadelphia. Mr. Charles Klein, my attorney, and his firm, Seidel, Sand and Seidel, will be holding a press conference to announce my plans for the future and my current health condition. Now, from that point on, you can attend the press conference if you wish, but we can't say anything until that press conference concerning this case. Any other question not concerning this case, we'd be glad to help you with.
Just your health in general, Mr. Graham.
It's not well.
What are the problems with your ankles?
Avascular narcosis of both ankles.
What kind of surgery have you had?
I've had on my right ankle, I've had a bone. My right ankle joint has been removed, and my right leg has been my right leg is now a half-inch shorter than my left.
Keep walking, Billy.
And they had to fuse the ankle joint by taking bone from my hip and from my shin, replacing it into my ankle joint.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that Billy Graham had to catch a plane, so he was walking to the hotel with the press all surrounding him. So I just want to let you know if you hear any walking and etc. That's what it's all about.
I still may require another operation on my right ankle again. My left one, they have to do the same thing to it.
What are your other... Mr. Graham, what have steroids done to you?
They ruined my life, and they ruined my wrestling career. They've totally made me a cripple for the rest of my life. I'll never be a normal man again. I cannot have children. I'm sterile, and that's a heavy price to pay when you want to have a family.
You blame that on the steroids?
The steroids made me sterile. Yes, exactly right.
What else have steroids done to you?
Step coming up. Watch the step coming up here, sir. Step coming up.
And you blame that all on steroid use?
Yes, it's proven, documented, the steroids cause all these side effects.
Joe, watch out for the curb. What do you think should happen to Dr. Zahorian?
I can't comment on Dr. Zahorian's outcome.
Billy, are you steroid used in English wrestling today?
It's widespread to the point that it's almost a plague in wrestling today, the use of steroids.
Billy, I'd like to ask you one question, a couple questions. Are you planning on suing the WWF?
Well,
On the voice of counsel, like the administrator.
you mean at the press conference I'm holding? Do you mean am I going to announce that?
Anytime.
Well, I can't comment on the
On the
advice
voice
of
of
my
counsel, we're making no statement with regard to any possible future legal actions he may take. Please confine your questions to his state of health.
Okay. Hulk Hogan was supposed to testify at this trial. CBS ran a piece earlier today saying that Hulk should apologize. What is your opinion of Hulk Hogan not coming here and being excused from his trial?
Well, first of all, my opinion of Hulk Hogan is that he's one of the greatest athletes the world has ever seen, and one of the greatest men the world has ever seen, and one of my best friends. But my own personal opinion is that I believe if, in fact, Hulk Hogan has taken steroids and it's been proven, he owes the world an apology, especially the little kids who idolize him and adore him. He should be man enough to say, I made a mistake if he took steroids.
Well, what do the steroids do?
They shut off the blood supply to the joint. They shut off the blood supply to the joint, and the bone dies. It's the death of a bone. And necrosis. That's what it is. Avascular necrosis. It's the death of a bone. The bone doesn't receive the blood supplies because the steroids have shut off the supply, and therefore no blood to the bone. The bone dies. The inside of my ankle, the doctors had never seen anything like that in their life. And one doctor said the only thing he saw like that was when he was a doctor in the war, and he saw ankles being blown off by grenades. So,
could you have been a professional wrestler of the caliber you were without steroids?
Yes. Yes, I didn't have to have steroids. People come to see wrestling. You know, it's a made thing. The steroid body thing is made. You know, it is not necessary because before the bodies were there, wrestling was selling out everywhere. Fabulous sport with plenty of attendance and exciting matches. So it does not need steroids.
Were doctors ever warning you about the dangers of steroids?
Never.
Billy, what do you think the wrestling promoters around the country to do about the steroid problem today?
That's a good question. Well, I can give a personal opinion what they could do. For example,
we got to catch.
Okay, let me answer this question. This is a very important question on the way to the Hilton here. For example, in the WWF, they test randomly for cocaine. This is a well-documented fact. Test the wrestlers on a random basis for cocaine. So, and if you're caught with cocaine, you have a different series of fines and punishments. So I feel that all the wrestling promoters have to do is, in fact, start testing for steroids. Start testing for anabolic steroids and outlaw them and not allow them. And if you're caught with steroids in your system, well, then you'll be fined and eventually be ejected. So the promoters can, in fact, get steroids out of pro wrestling. It's up to the promoter to do it. He's got the power if he wants to do it.
Okay, that was superstar Billy Graham, and that was after he testified during the trial of George.
I want to thank you people for the respect that you extended to me, to my patients, to the people here in this situation, and there'll finally be a verdict. Thank you.
And that was Zaharian, and then Gustopoulos, his attorney, made these statements during the jury deliberations.
The matter is in the hands of the jury. It's been very stressful for Dr. Zahorian and his wife and his family. It's been stressful to me. I never get used to it. We've got to wait for the verdict, and all we can do is hope for the best. And when the verdict comes in, we'll go from there, no matter what it is.
What bothered you about seeing superstar Billy Graham on the stand today?
What bothered me the most was it was testimony from a witness whose credibility I thought was very suspect. I mean, I happened to like the guy. I thought he was a colorful dimension to the trial, but I just didn't think he had a part in it. I mean, I'm glad he came in. I enjoyed cross-examining him, but I just didn't think that he played an important role to the government's case in an important case like this.
You've pretty much said that the doctor's guilty on 4 counts now.
I did say that. I mean, the doctor dispensed steroids to the wrestlers so that they could pursue their careers in small amounts. I did say that, and if the jury finds him guilty on that, we'll accept that verdict. I just don't like those done counts. I haven't from day one. I think what the government did in using that witness was very inappropriate, but that's a jury question. The other question I was asked was whether steroids have had an impact on Billy Graham's life. I have no medical indication of that whatsoever. I do know what his cross is right now. I do know what mission he's on right now, and it may be very legitimate, but the guy had been taking steroids in mega doses, uncontrolled and unsupervised, for 20 years. And he suffered a lot of trauma in the ring, and I have just seen no medical indication anywhere as to what caused his medical problems. But be it as it may, I wish him the best of health in the future.
And basically that was it. The jury deliberated for just a period of 3 hours. That's all it took to convict Dr. George Zahorian of 12 of 14 counts. He's scheduled to be sentenced within 2 months, and he could get up to 44 years in prison and over $3 million in fines. And after the trial, he said he would appeal, and that the truth will still come out about this trial. He said the final curtain hasn't been closed on this trial because he will indeed appeal it. So it's over for him as far as being convicted in this trial, but I have a feeling, Dave Meltzer, that this is certainly just opening up.
Well, there you go. I mean, the coverage of the trial in all its glory, or all its gory details. It was it was a long week for me to be there covering this thing every single day and trying to get the sound bites and do the interviews and then call in your reports and then rush back to do this episode of Pro Wrestling Spotlight. So it was a very, very busy, very challenging week for me.
This is one of the two stories at my job that rocked the magazine.
Yeah.
This was one, and believe it or not, the other one was the New Jersey State Athletic Commission admitting that wrestling was predetermined and announcing it.
Yeah, publicly, yes.
Stu Sachs was the publisher, and I thought he was going to have a stroke. But this shows you how permeant kayfabe was at that point, at least with our magazines.
Yeah.
Here was a story on the cover of the New York Times, mind you, that wrestling was predetermined, and he just couldn't get over that one. I don't think he said a word for 2 hours when somebody handed him the paper afterwards. But back to this story. Yeah, I mean, you had every star in wrestling, or many of the top stars at that trial, beat Brian Blair and Danny Spivey, Rick Martel and Roddy Piper and superstar Billy Graham. And you have to wonder if parents were saying, I'm not going to let my kids watch this anymore. And that had to affect the WWF too.
Yeah, well, that was a big part of it, because they were marketing their product to the kids. That was the main focus. And this was in top of mind for them, because if the kids weren't allowed to watch Hulk Hogan and the WWF on television, then their business was going to go south. And that's kind of exactly what happened. As we progressed, attendance started to fall, ratings were going down. It was not a good time.
That clip was from June 30th, 1991, for those of you keeping score at home.